Hi YouTube, I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about different Cthulhu and Lovecraft themed board games. You can leave at any time, it's fine. The first one I want to mention about, as I compare and kind of contrast each of these, is Arkham Horror. It's probably like the grandfather of a lot of these. It's by Fantasy Flight Games as well, who at this point has released, I suppose, about 900 million board games based on the Cthulhu mythos, so that's fun. Arkham Horror is probably one of the first well-known ones. It's a fully cooperative game. It's complex, it's heavy, it's thematic, it's serious. There's a sense of dread, there's a sense of isolation. It's the most fun game I've never finished. It's a long game. It's long. It's too long. It's too long. It's too long. And because it's too long, people moved on to different games, which are maybe not necessarily better in principle, but for practical purposes of having a fun board game that you can play from beginning to end, fully cooperative or not, other games have gotten better than it. So I do want to mention Arkham Horror. It's a fun game, it's a good game. You'll like it if you have a whole day to play Arkham Horror. Or not even a whole day, but just a long time, especially for your first game. Maybe once you're all experts, it won't take as long. But it's cool. It's a nice game. There's one I would compare it to, which is A Touch of Evil. A Touch of Evil is not, strictly speaking, Cthulhu themed or Lovecraftian themed. In fact, the base game doesn't really have anything like that. Although in the first expansion, Something Wicked, it does get a little bit more of the cultist, unspeakable horror kind of Cthulhu vibe to it. But A Touch of Evil really is a lot more themed like the Sleepy Hollow film that came out in the 90s. A lot more of that kind of upstate New York or New England, largely kind of dreary mists coming in, turn of 19th century kind of thing. And it's great. It's super thematic. It's super glossy. It's super fun. It's well crafted. It's a great, great, great game. The reason why I compare it to Arkham Horror is because A Touch of Evil has a similar kind of mechanism. The roll and move, the exploration, being fully cooperative as an option is there as well. It's just not exactly the same theme, even though they're both horror in that sense. But if you're looking for something like Arkham Horror, but lighter, people will say different things. They'll say Witch of Salem is like a Euro Arkham Horror, or Elder Sign, which I'll talk about in a moment, is like a light Arkham Horror. They'll mention different kinds of things, but really, for something that's like Arkham Horror light, but kind of a shifted theme, I just love A Touch of Evil. I think it's great. But Arkham Horror is fun too, so that's definitely one of the first big ones. After that, what I just mentioned, is Elder Sign. Elder Sign is fully cooperative, just like Arkham Horror. It's great Lovecraft theme. Some people think it's not that thematic. They're like, oh, the theme is kind of pasted on, you roll the dice, and that's your main mechanism for doing things. You have different cards which represent different rooms, or in the expansion they represent different sort of buildings or areas in Arkham, even though the base game is about this sort of haunted museum where there are gates to other worlds opening up and evil getting ready to come in and the great old one awakening. This is a pretty consistent theme with Elder Sign, with Arkham Horror, and with Eldritch Horror as well, which is the newest one. But Elder Sign is great. It's super fun, it's fast to play, it's just the right amount of complexity. It's dice and cards, but it doesn't feel like a dice and card game. It feels like a cool thematic board game. To me, I like it. To make it feel thematic, I think you don't want to just play it the way some people play Dominion, where you just say the card, you say the dice, oh, I got 2 squid, there's a skull here, I can complete this task, boom, this card is done. You want to read the flavor text, you want to read the fluff, you want to read the name of the card, you want to say your character's special ability and kind of get into that theme. So you can argue that the theme is pasted on only in as much as it's simple enough that you could make it an abstracted game, maybe, but I don't consider it a pasted on theme. I think Elder Sign is great. It's perhaps not as deep as Arkham Horror or some of the other ones as well, but as far as a fully cooperative, fun, easy to get into game that just uses simple components, but still has great art and things like that, I think Elder Sign is great. One of its weaknesses, perhaps, is that for replayability, it can get too easy. You can find it too easy to win. I think the most recent expansion, though, mitigates this some. I think it does get a little bit more challenging with like Gates of Arkham and things like that. So Elder Sign, definitely a big winner. I recommend it a lot, especially for that shorter game. If you're willing that it won't be as thematic, still thematic, but not as much. Next one I want to talk about is Mansions of Madness. Now, I love Mansions of Madness. I think it's amazing. I think it's awesome. I think this is one of the most thematic games I've ever played. Up there with like War of the Ring, up there with almost any kind of thematic game you can think of. Now, Mansions of Madness has this great one versus all mechanism, which is nothing new. We've seen that a million times. It's done in a particular way, though. It doesn't feel like a D&D board game or like Hero Quest or Descent. Outside of that fact, it feels very much like you're investigating this haunted place. There's some evil malice in the building or graveyard or wherever it takes place. What's cool is each of these games has kind of a different location that they're centered around. Elder Sign is centered around this one museum. It's a single building, which is cool. Different gates opening up, etc. Mansions of Madness typically is around one building as well, but different scenarios. So it could be a mansion. It could be a university, like Miskatonic University. It could be kind of an abandoned forest area, especially in the Call of the Wild expansion. Now, Mansions of Madness is super fun. I think it's one of the most thematic and really amazing games I've played. And it's also easy to teach people when they're being the investigators. But it does have some downsides. For one thing, until you get really good at setting up the game, the setup, especially for the keeper, is a bear. Just learning how to set things up properly. And more importantly, not only is it complex to set things up, or it take a long time at least, but it's easy to mess something up. You have to make sure you set everything up right, because it's like setting up a puzzle for someone. Like if you set up a Sudoku puzzle for somebody, you put the number in the wrong place, everything else will fall apart. This also led to some kind of serious errors when the game was first printed, and then when the first expansion came out. There were a couple errors in that, and then some scenarios didn't work right. They had to send errata and fixes. That's all fixed up now, though. Mansions of Madness is great if you're okay with the longer setup and you want that really spooky kind of atmosphere. Incidentally, the soundtrack to Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a wonderful, wonderful soundtrack to play while playing this game. Mansions of Madness, one versus all, very wonderful miniatures, which the other ones don't have. Eldritch Horror is the newest one, Arkham Horror, none of them have really amazing miniatures, which is fine. But if you want really cool miniatures, not just for the heroes, but for every single monster, Mansions of Madness is great. It has a zoomed in kind of feel to it. It's very kind of micro level. It doesn't feel abstracted or conceptualized. It's more micro. You'd almost be tempted to call it more tactical, but doesn't play like a tactical game. It's in a game of investigation. Strictly speaking, a lot of the main mechanisms are pick up and deliver, but you don't feel like you're doing pick up and deliver. You feel like you're following clues and trying to hold on to your sanity. And as far as sanity being a stat that you can lose, which is common in Cthulhu, Lovecraft games, Mansions of Madness makes it feel the most visceral. As far as having that haunted house feeling, Mansions of Madness is great. But it's also potentially one of the more clunky ones, especially for non-gamers, especially for folks who are setting up the keeper side of things. So, buyer beware with Mansions of Madness. Great game, but not for everybody. The next one to mention is Eldritch Horror. Eldritch Horror, I think, is the most recent one to come out. Now, Eldritch Horror is a little bit different than Arkham Horror. It's kind of a sequel. You could have both, you could play both, but I don't think you probably would based on everything that I've been reading and hearing. It seems that people are just largely preferring Eldritch Horror. And for one thing, is when you play with 4 people, and everyone's played before, it's about 2 hours. You can make it longer than that if people are taking their time or taking breaks or things, but it's basically a 2-hour game. Now, you shouldn't play it with more than 4 people, probably, and that's probably true for any of these games. 4 players is a good max, unless you really want to take a long time. But Eldritch Horror has the great kind of horror that you get from Mansions of Madness, mixed with some of the adventuring action kind of feeling that you might expect from something more like Fortune and Glory, which is a game by Flying Frog Games that people are tempted to compare it to. I don't think they should, because I still think there's a good place for Flying Frog for Fortune and Glory. I think it plays better as a competitive game, and the cooperative is too clunky. But for Eldritch Horror, it's only cooperative, and the cooperative version works great. So Fortune and Glory, globetrotting Indiana Jones pulp adventure for competitive and more lighthearted. Eldritch Horror, a little bit more fine-tuned, a little bit more for fully cooperative, and more horror adventure instead of just kind of pulp adventure. So that's my kind of tangent on Fortune and Glory and Eldritch Horror. I love both of them. But Eldritch Horror really might be the most universally accessible, heavy Cthulhu board game. I think it's great. I think it's a great fully cooperative feel. It is difficult. Unlike Elder Sign, which is a lot easier to beat, especially in the base game, Eldritch Horror is going to kick you around. It's going to be difficult to beat. You're going to have trouble with it. You're going to really be trying to stop Azathoth, the blind idiot god at the center of all creation, from entering the world and devouring it in lava despair. You know, it's awesome. It's great, and everything about it feels wonderful, but it's difficult to beat. It's a hard cooperative game, but it's satisfying and fun, and unlike Arkham Horror, I believe it's just the right length. Like 2.5. If it's your first time playing, you're playing with new gamers. If you include setup and explanation, you could stretch it to 3 hours pretty easily. But you're not going to be stretching it to this kind of Arkham Horror or Twilight Imperium or, God forbid, Monopoly lengths, like 5, 6, 7 hours. It's just not going to happen with Eldritch Horror. So long game or full length game, sure, but not too long. It's a movie length still, which to me is a good metric for how board games should be. They should be the length of movies, whether a long movie or a short movie, or the length of TV shows or programs or things like that. But once something is as long as a whole miniseries, I tend to lose interest, except for some very extraordinary exceptions to that. So that's kind of the basic take on some of my personal favorites of the Cthulhu Lovecraft mythos turned board games. There's also Call of Cthulhu, the like tabletop games, things like that, which I don't know as much about. People seem to really like them, and that's fantastic. There's also Call of Cthulhu, the living card game. I haven't played that, so I can't give a comparison on this card game. People say it's good, but is it better than these? I don't know. These are fantastic. So let me know what you think in the comments. Which is your favorite? Do you like Eldritch Horror the most? Do you like Mansions of Madness? Is Elder Sign the only one you'd really want to play? Definitely make it known how you feel. Witch of Salem kind of deserves a special mention as well. It doesn't feel as thematic. It's a little bit more simplistic in some ways, but the mechanics and rules are quite elegant. With the exception of one rule that no one likes and is worth just getting rid of that rule because it's silly. And you'll know what that rule is as soon as you read the rule book. Witch of Salem is a fun Euro Cthulhu game. It feels very Euro. The components feel Euro. The mechanisms feel Euro. It's fully cooperative. It's about an hour to play. Witch of Salem is fun. Now, am I going to want to play it as a thematic experience over something like Mansions of Madness or Elder Sign or Eldritch Horror? Maybe, probably not. But it does, if you're in the mood for a Euro game and you really just like that kind of vibe, it's cool. It also has a slightly different theme to it. It's kind of misleading. First of all, the witch is a man, not a woman, which is not impossible, but you kind of visualize it's going to be you expect it's going to be a woman. So shame on you for the sexism there. And with Witch of Salem, it's also the witch is a good person. They're helping you stop the ancient evil from awakening and entering the town of Arkham and things like that. And so great games, one and all. They're awesome. Figuring out the right one for your game group. You might want to keep doing. I think that's all I want to say on this. Actually, I think I want to cut it off earlier. Yeah, I'll cut it off earlier.